On. Thank you, panel. I want to bring in now Matt Axelrod, the former top deputy to the former acting Attorney General Sally Yates. Let me ask you, that's my first question to you. If there's, talking about this Washington Post reporting and New York Times reporting, if there's unpardoning and so on and undercutting Mueller and his investigators, if there is nothing to hide, then why undercut? Why not just say, investigate me, I have nothing to hide?
Yeah, you raise a good question, Don, and I think it goes back to the comments that the president made to the New York Times reporters the other day, and when he attacked the Jeff Sessions recusal. And really, you know, an attack on the recusal is an attack on the independence of the Department of Justice. And that's an attack on the Department of Justice's commitment to the rule of law. And that's a problem, right? Because ordinarily, you would expect that the president would allow an investigation to proceed to its conclusion. And the notion that there are sort of discussions or thoughts about short-circuiting that investigation is very troubling.
Hey, Matt, what is his power to issue pardons? Can he issue for his family? Can he issue for his staff? Can he issue for himself?
Yeah, so the last question, I believe, is the trickiest one. I'm not a subject matter expert in this area, but I believe there is some legal debate over the propriety of issuing a pardon for himself. It would, you know, the analogy is if a judge were to preside in his or her own case. That's not something that is recognized in our legal system. Pardoning friends and family or other associates who work at the White House is within my understanding is within the president's constitutional pardon power. To me, it seems that an interesting legal question might arise, though, if that pardon power were being used not just to pardon close associates, but hypothetically to pardon close associates because you are worried those close associates might have information that would implicate you. Then maybe the legal scenario would be different, but like I said, that's not my particular area of expertise.
Let's talk more about the Post reporting tonight. The Post also reports that the president is disturbed after learning that Mueller would be able to access several years of his tax returns. He has gone to greater lengths than any president before him to keep those tax returns secret. Can you speak to whether obtaining tax returns would be in the normal scope of a special counsel investigation?
Sure, and I served as a federal prosecutor for quite some time, and obtaining tax returns is a fairly standard investigative step in appropriate cases. The Department of Justice has very strict policies and procedures about when tax returns can be accessed and how they must be stored. They're given a very deliberate and careful handling so that they are treated with confidentiality.
So you're saying it would be appropriate for him to do that?
It all depends on the predicate, but if, as I believe the discussion with the panel earlier was saying, if there are allegations that that what happened with Russia somehow related to prior financial dealings, then yeah, I think that makes
that's what the directive to Mueller says. That it says, I don't have the direct, and it's paraphrasing here. I'm doing it to the best of my recollection here. That what it has to do with the Russia investigation and any investigation following that, or that may lead to. So it appears that would be in the scope of Robert Mueller.
I think, well, and it's Robert Mueller's decision as to whether it's within the scope of the investigation or not. And as we know, Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, is the person who oversees the special counsel. And if someone thought that the special counsel or his team were accessing or attempting to access evidence or documents that were beyond the scope, they could say something about it. And I should say the flip side is true too, which is that if the special counsel, during the course of his investigation, discovered additional areas that he thought were worthy of investigation, the regulations in place deal with that scenario and that possibility, and the special counsel then has to go back to the Attorney General, in this case it's the acting Attorney General for this matter, Rod Rosenstein, and ask for permission and additional grant of authority to broaden the scope of his investigation. But I don't think he would need to do that to seek tax returns, assuming again that his view is that the tax returns are relevant to the topic he has already been mandated to investigate.
Matt, I want to ask you about what the president told the New York Times about how he sees the role of the FBI director. And this is a quote he said, "But the FBI person really reports directly to the President of the United States, which is interesting, you know, which is interesting. And I think we're going to have a great new FBI director." Can you speak to the idea that seemingly the president has that he thinks that the FBI director and the attorney general work for him personally?
Yeah, sure. And first I should say I agree with the last part of that quote. I think we are going to have a great new FBI director. I think Chris Wray was a terrific choice by the president, and I think he'll serve the FBI and the country well. But the president is wrong on the organizational chart of the Department of Justice. The FBI director quite clearly reports to the Deputy Attorney General, and then through the Deputy Attorney General to the Attorney General. The FBI director does not report straight to the president.
The Deputy Press Secretary said today that the president has confidence in Attorney General Jeff Sessions. But I mean, if you read the quotes and you read that New York Times, what he told the New York Times, and if we have the sound, I would love to be able to play it. It doesn't seem like he has confidence in the Attorney General and in the job that he's doing, does he? Even though the Deputy Press Secretary said that.
Well, I think the thing that's so surprising is the attack he made on the Attorney General was for the Attorney General having recused himself from an investigation that he clearly needed to recuse himself from. He did that based on the recommendations of career ethics officials at the Department of Justice saying that recusal was necessary. So what the Attorney General did in this circumstance was perfectly in keeping with expectations and the way the Department of Justice operates.
But he's saying I would not have hired him had I known he was going to recuse himself, and that he, didn't answer the questions properly, some very simple questions. It doesn't sound like he has confidence in him.
Well, that's the part of the interview that I think that's so extraordinary, because if you unpack that, essentially what the president is saying is, I thought I'm entitled to have a loyalist in that position, and that the person I thought was going to be my loyalist stepped aside, and now I have to deal with people who are going to do it without a thumb on the scale like I expected my loyalist to. And that is not the way the system works. That has never been anyone's expectation of how their Attorney General would function. The only loyalty that the Attorney General pledges, it's not to a particular person or political administration, it's to the Constitution and to the rule of law.
Every American should be concerned about what he said to the New York Times last night. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Matt Axelrod. When we come right back.